Back to the big news, of course, here in Canada. We have no shortage of it, considering we're dead in the middle of August. We do have a new finance minister, and first order of business, Chrystia Freeland will, as we expect, to be part of this announcement this afternoon as we learn how CERB is going to be rolled up and how it's going to transition into employment supports for Canadians still suffering through the pandemic. It's going to be pretty big. This is probably the first announcement of a string of announcements we can expect through the fall as the government talks about charting a new course and a green course. So let's bring in Brad Wall, Special Advisor at NexGen Energy, former Saskatchewan Premier as well. Always great to see you. And let's start with, today, let's start with the CERB benefit. Obviously we saw big spending plans to get people through the pandemic. This feels like the first inning, the first unofficial inning of this idea that the Liberals said they're going to start charting a new course. What are you looking for?
Well, I think with respect to CERB and some of the other supports that were meant to basically backstop the economy through the pandemic, there's going to need to be a bit of pullback in the interest of the fiscal health of Canada, both short, mid, and long term. But I think as they move away from CERB, they're going to have to ensure that it's not too drastic. As we've seen the job numbers stateside today, there's going to continue to need to be support. We do have unemployment insurance and other support measures. So as they transition out of CERB, I think they'll have to perhaps do so in a way that's sensitive to the need to blend it towards training. Some jobs that we've lost around the globe really may not be coming back, and there's an imperative around training to jobs that have been maintained through the pandemic and whose prospects look good going forward, maybe a little bit better than other sectors. I also think it's going to be important to blend the sensitivity towards entrepreneurship. This has been a trend now for over a decade as we've seen people move to self-employment. I think the pandemic will only add to that momentum, and whatever they do with CERB needs to be sensitive to that, but something probably needs to be done. I've experienced the same anecdotal stories I'm sure that you have and the viewers have around CERB over the summer, where some sectors were having trouble attracting employees. Some contractors I know had trouble competing with $2,000 a month for CERB for some construction laborers, for example. So there is a need for adjustment. I think we are going to begin to see that. It's a tough challenge ahead for the new finance minister, but an important one.
Okay, so this is one of the first challenges on the plate, of course. We are hearing about, Parliament's already been prorogued. September 23rd, we're going to get a speech from the throne, and this is going to lay out their agenda. They've already given us a hint, Mr. Trudeau and Ms. Freeland as well, about a green economic restart. We don't know the details of it right now, but is there anything about those words that give you a sense of caution, considering how much Alberta, how much Saskatchewan relies on natural resources?
Well, I think the country relies on natural resources. Let's remember that the natural resource sector in our country, not just oil and gas, but mining, agriculture is a foundational sector for the entire country. And so we need to be concerned when we hear those sorts of things, but remembering they're only just words. I think at her very first scrum after being appointed finance minister, she did mention that the restart or the recovery plan would be green, but she said it would also need to be inclusive and equitable. So maybe I'm being naively hopeful here, but I'm reading into that she means inclusive of all sectors and of all regions of the country. And the best indicator of future behavior is past behavior. With Chrystia Freeland, we've had a very, I think, pragmatic, moderate compared to other colleagues in the cabinet, perhaps the Prime Minister himself, approach to policy. She's been effective on trade, on the U.S.-Canada trade file. She has been tasked by the Prime Minister right after the election this last fall with reaching out to the West. And, from what I've heard from both governments in Alberta and Saskatchewan, they've respected the earnestness of her approach to the West and the job that she's done. And so let's hope that it's that Chrystia Freeland that continues in this now key finance role. It's interesting to have witnessed what happened over the last 2 weeks, that senior Liberals leaking to the media that Bill Morneau was leaving cabinet because he was the fiscal responsible one. He was the moderate one, and he was pushing it back against the Prime Minister's sort of more ideological or left-leaning ways in terms of fiscal policy, certainly, which is a shock, I think, to a lot of us who have observed and a lot of Canadians who have watched Bill Morneau and Justin Trudeau rack up deficits, even in good times. And yet we've heard the last little while that he was the fiscally responsible one. I think actually that person is Chrystia Freeland, certainly one of them in the federal cabinet, who's a bit more like the the Martin Chrétien vintage of liberals. And I think that's what the country needs right now. We need a pragmatic approach that includes the resource sector, that includes oil and gas. They are going to be generating jobs as well in the recovery that we need. They're going to, remembering, of course, that in the case of oil and gas, we have the third largest reserves on the planet. And we should act like it. We should pursue that development in a sustainable way as we have in the past. But I hope that Chrystia Freeland brings some pragmatism and some moderation to the policies of the federal government.
If the new finance minister does bring that kind of moderation and pragmatism, I mean, Alberta seems to be very cautious on these words of a green restart. But as we look out decades, not just the next couple of years, but decades, I mean, can Alberta take part in this and really flourish if the government is going to lay the framework for what energy looks like 20, 30, 40 years from now? Absolutely.
Alberta and Saskatchewan can do that. They've already been diversifying and transitioning. There's a great success story on the tech job, in the tech sector in both provinces. There's a great story around agriculture that continues to unfold as the world wants more of what we have to offer, especially on the plant protein side of things. So I think the short answer to your question is absolutely.
Okay, so we know you're a special, many of the roles you've had since leaving politics, one of them special advisor at NexGen Energy. Of course, we're talking about a uranium play there. Is there an opportunity here as the federal Liberals look for a greener restart of the economy for uranium, for nuclear?
There absolutely is. We've seen a renaissance, we've seen an increase on the spot price. And we've seen, I think, exposed some of the weaknesses and vulnerabilities in supply issues for uranium. Canada used to be the leader in the world in terms of uranium production. And as we see the price increase, we see potential shortages down the road in supply. We also have, in the case of NexGen that you've referenced, pre-commercial certainly, but what will be the largest mine in the world. So a huge opportunity for Canada to lead as the world looks at nuclear now, not just in the conventional way, but here in Canada, we have now 4 premiers, led by Premier Moe in Saskatchewan, Premier Ford in Ontario, Premier Higgs in New Brunswick, and recently Premier Kenney has joined that effort to encourage the country to focus on small modular reactor technology in the nuclear space. We've seen in California what happens when you go hard on renewables without a proper planning for baseload. You see brownouts. Well, the only zero emissions baseload energy you can find in the world today, zero emission, is uranium. Canada has a lot of it, and we should be acting like it. There should be.
It's always great to get your thoughts.
By that, of course, there needs to be policies in place that promote not just uranium mining and production and trade promotion with countries that are building their civilian nuclear fleet, but also in terms of the value add in reactor technology as well.
All right, very interesting stuff there. Always great to get your thoughts. Thanks for joining us, Brad.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Brad Wall, of course, the former Premier of Saskatchewan, also a special advisor at NexGen Energy.